The words fell like ice into the silence of the office, and though I had imagined 1,000 versions of this day, nothing prepared me for the finality of it. Rebecca, your position has been eliminated. I stood frozen in front of my boss's glass desk, staring at the cold reflection of the city skyline in the polished surface. The HR manager sat stiffly beside her, avoiding my eyes, clutching a folder that I already knew contained my severance documents, my NDA, the polite phrases designed to shut me up and push me out. I heard the words, but I didn't flinch. Maybe because in that moment I understood that everything had already shifted the day Kitana was lowered into the ground. Kitana, the only person in this entire company who ever saw me as more than a replaceable cog. My mentor, my ally, the woman who taught me that numbers on a spreadsheet could be turned into living contracts if you cared enough to fight for them. She died suddenly, an aneurysm on a Sunday morning, and while half the office whispered about how tragic it was, the other half wondered aloud who would inherit her accounts. None of them knew that the answer was me. I could still hear her voice in the back of my head, weeks before she died, when she placed that thick black binder into my hands. This portfolio is yours now, Rebecca. Don't tell anyone. You'll know when the time is right. Inside that binder were contracts worth over $7 million in annual revenue. Not projections, not promises. Signed agreements with clients who trusted Kitana, and, by extension, me. It wasn't a gift, not exactly. It was protection, insurance. Something that could either save me or destroy me, depending on when I chose to reveal it. And so, when my boss, a woman who had never hidden her dislike of me, announced with an almost gleeful formality that my role had been realigned out of existence, I simply inhaled, held my breath, and exhaled slowly. "Do you understand?" she asked, tilting her head as if I were a child refusing to accept bedtime. "Yes," I said quietly. My voice did not tremble. The HR rep slid the papers across the desk toward me. I didn't touch them. My hands stayed calmly at my sides, though my palms burned from holding myself still. "Security will escort you out once you've gathered your belongings." Of course. The ritual humiliation. I nodded once, then turned to leave. My heels clicked against the marble floor of her office, and the sound echoed louder than I expected. Behind me, I heard the faint whisper of the HR rep asking, "Should we?" And my boss's reply, a sharp, "No. Let her go." As I stepped into the hallway, the office was waiting. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some filled with curiosity, some with amusement, and some with that subtle malice unique to corporate environments, the look of people who thrive on watching someone else lose. A few offered fake smiles, the kind people wear when they want to signal they're relieved it wasn't them. Not one person stood up. I didn't give them the satisfaction of hesitation. I walked calmly to my desk, slid my personal items into a bag, and ignored the whispers. A framed photo of my parents, a mug Kitana once gave me that read, "Don't confuse my silence for weakness," and the binder. Always the binder. I placed it carefully at the bottom of the bag, out of sight. When security appeared beside my desk, I looked at the guard, a kind-eyed man who once helped me carry a heavy box of files, and smiled faintly. He looked uncomfortable, as if he knew I didn't belong in this parade of shame, but rules were rules. As I walked past my colleagues for the last time, I could feel the weight of their stares. My boss's door was still open, her silhouette visible behind the glass, already moving on with her day. She didn't even look up. At the elevator, I turned once more to face the office floor that had consumed the last 6 years of my life. The chatter had already resumed. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, laughter bubbling in the corner, where two analysts always told jokes about everyone else. To them, I was already gone. But what they didn't know was that I had something they didn't. 7 million reasons not to be afraid. When the elevator doors closed, I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. It wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. It was simply the knowledge that what had just begun was far from the end. Because if Kitana had trusted me with that portfolio, then it wasn't meant to die with her. And if management was too blind, too arrogant, or too cruel to see what I had built, then the consequences of their decision would arrive soon enough. Tomorrow, maybe, or the next day. But soon, the inevitable would begin. The first time I noticed something was wrong with Katana, it was nothing dramatic. Just a pause in her movement that lasted a little too long. We were in her office late in the evening, the city lights stretching out beyond the wide windows, and she was scribbling notes on a legal pad while dictating instructions for a client meeting the next morning. Then her pen slipped from her hand. She froze, her eyes focused on nothing, and for a second her face seemed older, almost fragile. "Are you okay?" I asked, leaning forward. She blinked twice, picked up the pen again, and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Rebecca. Just tired. Don't look at me like that." But I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. Katana was never careless. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of executives and silence them with nothing more than the rustle of her papers. She never missed a detail. And yet that night, she shuffled her notes twice, as if she'd forgotten the order. And when she finally dismissed me, she stayed sitting in the dark long after I left. It wasn't until 3 weeks later, in the quiet corner of a small cafe, far from the office, that she told me the truth. 6 months, she said simply, stirring her tea without looking at me. I stared at her, waiting for her to clarify. 6 months for what? Her eyes lifted slowly, and the expression on her face was one I had never seen before. Not anger, not exhaustion, not even fear, just a weary acceptance. 6 months to live, she said. Give or take. My throat closed. Number, that can't. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Stage 4, she said, her tone flat but steady. The oncologist was very clear. I've started treatment, but it won't stop what's coming. At best, it buys time. The cafe noise seemed to fade around me. Cups clinking, voices murmuring, the hiss of the espresso machine. All of it receded into silence. You can't be serious, I whispered. Kitana, you look fine. That's the trick of it, she said, finally allowing a faint smile. For now, I do. And that's exactly how I need it to stay. No one at the company can know. Not yet. I shook my head, unable to process. Katana, the woman who had built the firm's most profitable portfolio, who always appeared untouchable, who had once looked me dead in the eye during my lowest point and said, "You're stronger than they want you to believe." Now she was telling me her life was quietly counting down. I don't understand, I managed. Why are you telling me this? Her hand reached across the table, steady, firm, anchoring me in the storm of my thoughts. Because you need to be ready. For what? For after I'm gone, she said. I couldn't speak. Katana leaned back, her expression sharpening the way it always did when she shifted from mentor to strategist. Rebecca, I don't have family, no children, no siblings, no one I trust outside of work. The only thing I've built in this world is my client portfolio, and it's worth more than anyone in management realizes. If they understood, they would have already tried to take it from me. That's why I've kept it close. But I can't leave it floating when I'm gone. It has to go to someone who won't squander it, someone who understands what loyalty means. She paused, her gaze locking on mine. That someone is you. I laughed, but it came out strained, almost desperate. Me? Kitana, I'm barely holding my position as it is. Half the executives would fire me tomorrow if they had the chance. Why would you trust me with something like this? Because you're the only one who still cares about the clients as people, she said bluntly. I've seen it. You listen when they talk. You remember their families, their stories. You understand that contracts are built on trust, not just signatures. That's why they'll follow you. That's why I've been preparing this. She slid a manila folder across the table. I opened it with trembling hands and found documents inside. Amendments, service agreements, legal authorizations, all with neat signatures and dates. What is this? Transfers, she said. Slow, careful, invisible to anyone not looking closely. I've already started moving several of my clients into your management. It looks like delegation, nothing unusual. Everyone knows I lean on you for support. But in reality, I'm making you their primary contact, one by one. No alarms, no noise. By the time I'm gone, they'll already be yours, legally and practically. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. This is insane. If they find out, they won't, she interrupted. And if they do, it's all above board. Every signature is valid, every authorization legal. I'm not leaving you stolen goods. I'm leaving you the foundation of survival. Her voice softened then, the steel giving way to something heavier. Rebecca, after my funeral, the knives will come out. The company is full of vultures. They'll circle, they'll fight over my accounts, they'll try to erase my name. And they'll come for you too, because they'll sense you're the weak link. But what they won't realize is that you already hold the contracts. $7 million annually, secured under your management. They can't erase that without exposing themselves. That will be your shield. I shook my head again, overwhelmed. Kitana, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not like you. You're strong, she finished for me. Feared? Ruthless? Maybe. But don't mistake their cruelty for my strength. I was like you once, quiet, eager to be fair. That's why I can see what they'll do to you if you don't prepare. You don't need to become me, Rebecca. You just need to survive long enough to outlast them. The rest will take care of itself. Her words sat heavy between us. I wanted to argue, to insist that there had to be another way. But deep down, I knew she was right. The company didn't reward loyalty. It devoured it. And if Kitana was gone, I would be nothing more than a target. So over the next months, we worked in plain sight. She introduced me to clients during meetings, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Rebecca will handle that follow-up, she'd say casually. Or, Rebecca's been managing this part of the contract, she knows the details. No one blinked. To everyone else, it was just Kitana being efficient, spreading her workload. Behind the scenes, documents were signed. Some labeled joint account management, others delegated authority, all written in careful, precise legal language that made the transition appear seamless. I kept copies of everything, every email, every notarized page, every acknowledgement of my new role. Kitana insisted. Never rely on their memory, she told me. Only on paper. There were moments when the weight of it nearly crushed me. Late at night, staring at the binder filling with contracts, I wondered if I was being set up to fail. I wondered if the executives would tear me apart once Kitana was gone. But Kitana always knew when my doubts crept in. She'd call me into her office, close the door, and remind me in her calm, unwavering voice, "This isn't theft. This isn't trickery. You've earned this. The clients trust you already. I'm just making sure the law matches reality." As her illness advanced, she grew thinner, slower, but never weaker in spirit. She came to the office every day, lipstick sharp, heels clicking, refusing to let anyone see the truth. To the company, she was still Kitana, unbreakable. To me, she was both mentor and general, preparing me for the battle she knew I couldn't avoid. One night, when the office was empty and the city lights glowed against the glass, she leaned back in her chair, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. When they come for you, and they will, don't fight them on their terms. Don't argue, don't beg, don't let them see you afraid. Just smile, walk out if you must, and wait. Because the contracts will speak louder than anything you say." I wanted to cry, but she wouldn't allow it. "Don't mourn me now, Rebecca. Save that for later. Right now, learn, listen, and be ready." 6 months later, I stood at her funeral, listening to hollow speeches from executives who never respected her while she was alive. They praised her loyalty, her brilliance, her discipline, all while calculating in their heads how to divide her accounts. I stood quietly at the back, clutching the binder in my bag, knowing none of them had the faintest idea that her plan had already unfolded. Her warning echoed in my head. After my death, The real struggle will begin. And she was right. Because 1 week later, they called me into the office and told me I was fired. If anyone had asked what my days looked like during those months, I could have given them the clean version. Meetings, follow-ups, drafting summaries for Katana, the usual tasks of someone serving as a helpful second pair of hands. That was the official narrative. The unofficial one was far more dangerous. I was slowly becoming the voice our clients trusted most. Katana orchestrated it with the precision of someone who had spent her career outmaneuvering predators. Each step looked innocent, every transfer disguised as convenience. A client called about an urgent change? Rebecca's already familiar, she'll handle it. A contract renewal approaching? Rebecca drafted the proposal, you can discuss details with her. No one questioned it. After all, I was Katana's shadow, her natural backup. What no one realized was that I was no longer just shadow, I was the one standing in the light. The first client I met directly was Turner & Beck, a mid-sized manufacturing firm whose CEO, Greg Turner, had worked with Katana for nearly a decade. We walked into his office together, Katana smiling with her usual steel-edged warmth. "Greg," she said smoothly, "I want you to meet Rebecca. She's been handling your service agreements for months already. From now on, I'd like her to be your first point of contact." Greg looked at me, skeptical. "First point of contact? You mean if I can't reach you?" "Even before that," Katana replied without hesitation. "She already knows your renewal schedule, your performance targets, even your pet complaints about our billing system." That made him chuckle. "You know about those, huh?" I smiled, keeping my voice calm. "I read every email twice. And yes, I've already drafted a proposal to fix the billing cycle delays. It's sitting on your desk." He blinked, surprised. Then he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "Well, that's more than I usually get around here." It was a small victory, but it mattered. By the end of the meeting, Greg shook my hand as firmly as he did Katana's. The shift had begun. Over the next weeks, I repeated the process again and again. Tempest Living Well, whose catering company relied on us for logistics, became comfortable calling me directly when her suppliers faltered. Vernon Hutchcraft, the factory owner with the golden retriever Katana once mentioned, began checking in with me about expansion plans. Each time, Katana sat quietly nearby, letting me take the lead, intervening only when necessary. She was handing me her clients one by one, but she did it in such a way that no outsider could accuse us of anything unusual. Behind the scenes, the paperwork moved through Katana's personal lawyer, a sharp man named Eldon, who always met me in discreet cafes, with folders too thick to be casual. Every document was airtight, every clause reviewed twice, every transfer logged legally. It was invisible to the company's radar because it didn't need to pass through their hands. "Your signature here," Eldon would say, sliding pages toward me. His expression was always unreadable, but once, after I hesitated, he murmured, "Don't worry, these contracts don't lie. You're more legitimate than half the executives already." Still, it wasn't easy. The office noticed changes. People gossip in environments where success is scarce, and whispers started following me down hallways. "Have you noticed Katana keeps shoving Rebecca into meetings?" One voice hissed in the break room. "She's grooming her," another said, almost mocking. "For what, though? Katana's not going anywhere." "She's playing favorites, that's what. Rebecca's getting opportunities the rest of us don't." I pretended not to hear, but the tension pressed on me. My desk became a place where eyes lingered too long, where comments cut sharper than before. And always, there was my boss. Not Katana, but the director above her, watching me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Her suspicion grew with every client lunch I attended, every time I returned with a signed amendment in my bag. She couldn't stop me. The documents looked like ordinary delegation, nothing more. But I could feel her searching for cracks. One afternoon, she called me into her office. The blinds were half drawn, the air heavy with the scent of her perfume. She gestured for me to sit, but didn't smile. "You've been busy," she said, her tone cool. "I try to keep up," I answered carefully. Her eyes narrowed. "More than keeping up. You've been very visible lately. Meetings, negotiations, lunches. Kitana seems to rely on you, exclusively." "She trusts me," I said simply. "That's one word for it." She leaned back, her nails tapping against her glass desk. "I hope you're not confusing temporary assistance with actual authority, because when senior staff delegate, it's still their name on the account." I kept my voice calm, neutral. "Of course." But I knew she didn't believe me. She was circling, waiting for proof. Back at my desk, the whispers grew louder. A colleague passed by and muttered under her breath, "Teacher's pet," loud enough for me to hear. Another joked about how I must have blackmail material on Kitana. I ignored them all, just as Kitana had taught me. "Never defend yourself against rumors," she once said. "Let them choke on their own assumptions." The irony was that the rumors weren't entirely wrong. I was being groomed, not for promotion, but for survival. By the third month, the transition was nearly complete. Clients called my line first. Contracts bore my name. Yet to the company, it still looked like I was nothing more than Kitana's diligent backup. And then, one evening, long after most of the office had left, Kitana closed her office door and looked at me with an expression that sent chills down my spine. "They're starting to notice," she said. I sat straighter. "Who?" "Everyone. The whispers don't matter, but the director's eyes do. She's suspicious, and suspicion is dangerous. She'll dig, she'll try to catch you, but she won't find anything. As long as we stay clean, we're untouchable." I swallowed hard. "And if she does find something?" Kitana leaned forward, her voice low, almost gentle. "Then you keep quiet. You let her believe whatever she wants. The paperwork protects you. The clients protect you. When I'm gone, they'll try to erase me and they'll come for you. But you'll have more power than they can imagine." Her words echoed in me long after I left that night. Walking through the empty office, past the cubicles where colleagues had laughed at my expense, I clutched my bag tightly. Inside it was the latest signed transfer, just one of dozens now, and I realized how much weight I was carrying. Not just contracts, not just responsibility, but Kitana's final gift and the danger that came with it. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than routine assistance, but the truth was already written in ink and signatures. I wasn't just a shadow anymore. I was becoming the center, and the closer I moved to that center, the more the walls of the company began to close in around me. The call came on a Monday morning, just before dawn. I was half asleep, my alarm still 20 minutes away, when my phone buzzed across the nightstand. At first, I almost ignored it. The only people who ever called me that early were clients overseas. But when I saw the name on the screen, Eldon, Kitana's lawyer, my stomach dropped before I even answered. "Rebecca!" His voice was clipped, factual, professional, but his tone carried a weight I had never heard before. "It's Kitana. She collapsed at home last night. The hospital confirmed a cardiac arrest. She didn't make it." I sat up in bed, sheets twisted around me, trying to process words that made no sense. "No," I whispered. "No, she was fine on Friday. We had lunch." She laughed. "She knew it was coming," Eldon said softly. "She asked me to call you first." The line went silent, but the world around me roared. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, my own heartbeat, hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. Kitana was gone. I don't remember the hours that followed. I know I dressed mechanically. I know I walked into the office with swollen eyes, and people glanced at me with a kind of cautious curiosity, like grief was a foreign language they didn't speak. By noon, an all-staff email had gone out. It is with deep sadness that we announce the passing of our esteemed colleague, Kitana Vey. She was an integral part of our company's success, and she will be missed. 2 sentences. That was all. By mid-afternoon, Management had already begun planning what they called a formal remembrance ceremony. Not a memorial, not a service, but an event. The kind you could check off on a to-do list. HR sent out calendar invites. Executives drafted their speeches. Someone from marketing designed a tasteful slide deck with her photo against a gray background. The funeral was scheduled for Thursday. When the day came, I arrived early. The church was filled with flowers, their scent heavy in the air, almost suffocating. People shuffled in quietly, dressed in black, murmuring to each other in voices that felt more like gossip than mourning. I sat near the front, my hands clenched in my lap, tears blurring everything. To me, Kitana wasn't just a colleague. She was my anchor, the only one who had ever believed I was more than disposable. And now she was a closed casket, surrounded by lilies, while people who had undermined her in life prepared to speak glowing words about her in death. One by one, the executives took the podium. They praised her dedication, her strategic mind, her commitment to excellence. Each phrase felt hollow, rehearsed, detached. I knew the truth. Most of them had despised her. They feared her power, resented her independence. And now, with her gone, they were already circling her accounts like vultures. After the service, as people mingled in small clusters, I stood alone by the coffin. My tears weren't polite or controlled. They came hot, heavy, unstoppable. I didn't care who saw. That's when I overheard them. Two managers from the sales division, whispering behind me, not realizing I could hear. "Well, now the question is, who inherits the portfolio?" one said. "Her accounts are too big to leave with the junior staff. Leadership will have to redistribute them. I'll push for Turner and Beck. They've always fit better with my team." "Ann Tempest living well should come to me," the other replied. "She won't last with Rebecca. Too green, too soft. The clients need someone seasoned." I turned slowly, my face wet, my expression blank. They froze when they saw me. One cleared his throat awkwardly. "Oh, Rebecca, so sorry for your loss. She was remarkable." I didn't respond. I simply walked away, but their words burned into me. They thought the clients were theirs to divide. They thought I was nothing more than a placeholder, someone to be brushed aside once the paperwork was shuffled. They had no idea. That night, I stayed awake staring at the binder Kitana had left me. Each page was a shield, each contract a weapon. She had prepared me for this moment. After my death, the real struggle will begin. She had been right. The next morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. The building was still dark, the hum of the HVAC echoing through the empty halls. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and drafted a single-page letter. "To whom it may concern, please accept this letter as my formal resignation, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity. Rebecca Allen." I printed it, signed it, and walked it straight to HR. The woman at the desk blinked in surprise when I handed it over. "You're resigning? Now?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Effective today." She fumbled with her keyboard. "But what about Kitana's clients? Management will need the list." I placed a second folder on the desk. Thin, deliberately thin. "This is what I can provide," I said. Inside were names. Just names. No contact details, no updated agreements, no notes about expansion plans or personal details. A list that looked complete, but wasn't. It was the shadow of the real portfolio, a decoy designed to satisfy the surface while concealing the truth. The real contracts, the $7 million in annual revenue Kitana had legally transferred, stayed locked in my binder. I smiled faintly. That's all I have. By noon, the news had spread through the office like wildfire. Rebecca had resigned. Kitana's right hand was gone. People whispered theories, that I was too grief-stricken to continue, that I was unprepared, that management had pushed me out quietly. No one guessed the truth. As I walked out for the last time, carrying only my bag and that heavy binder hidden inside, I passed the same colleagues who had once sneered at me. Some looked smug, others relieved. A few even murmured fake condolences. I didn't stop. I didn't explain. I didn't give them anything. At the elevator, I pressed the button, turned back once, and took in the office where I had spent years of my life. To them, I was leaving defeated. To me, I was leaving armed. Because they thought the clients belonged to them. But by tomorrow, they would begin to realize just how wrong they were. The first morning after my resignation, I sat at my kitchen table with Katana's binder in front of me. The pages felt heavier than ever, like the weight of her trust pressed down on my chest. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed. Buses rumbling, people rushing to work. But everything had changed for me. I was no longer part of the company. I was free, and yet freedom without direction is chaos. I needed to make her plan real. The first step was money. I walked into a downtown bank branch, carrying a leather folder with my resignation letter, a proof of funds document Eldon had prepared, and the incorporation papers we'd quietly filed months earlier under Katana's guidance. The banker smiled politely, asked a few procedural questions, and within an hour I had what I needed. A business account under the name Viridian Strategies, LLC. The name had been Katana's idea. Something clean, something that sounds older than it is, she'd said. Names matter more than you think. A client is more likely to trust Viridian than Rebecca Allen Consulting. She had been right about everything else. I trusted she was right about this too. The second step was space. I couldn't keep operating from my apartment. Clients expected professionalism, not phone calls echoing from a cramped kitchen. I found a small office suite in a building 3 blocks from the river. One room, a shared conference space, barely enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. But it had a glass door with my company name etched on it, and when I turned the key for the first time, I felt something click inside me. This was mine. The third step was trust, and that came more naturally than I expected. By the end of the first week, Turner and Beck called me directly. Greg Turner didn't even bother pretending. "I heard you left," he said. His tone was half amusement, half admiration. "The old firm called yesterday, tried to shuffle me over to a new account manager. I told them no. If Katana trusted you, then so do I. You've already done more for us than anyone else." His words nearly broke me, but I kept my voice steady. "I'll make sure you never regret it." The next day, Tempest Living Well reached out. Then Vernon Hutchcraft. Then, one after another, the same pattern unfolded. The old company scrambled to reassign accounts, but the clients refused. They weren't contracts on paper anymore. They were relationships built with care, with memory, with human connection. Katana had taught me that. By the second week, my office was filled with fresh folders, not just photocopies from Katana's binder, but new agreements signed under Viridian's name. Each signature felt like a victory, not over the company, but over the fear that had once ruled me. That's when the calls started. The first was polite. A lawyer from the firm rang me one afternoon while I was still unpacking boxes. His voice was smooth, professional, rehearsed. "Rebecca, this is strictly a courtesy call. We're aware you've been in contact with several of our former clients. We want to avoid unnecessary conflict. Perhaps you'd consider a consulting agreement. You'd continue servicing these clients, but under our umbrella, with compensation." It was tempting for exactly 1 second. Security, a paycheck, a chance to avoid war. But then I remembered Katana's warning. "They will try to buy you before they try to break you." "No," I said simply. There was a pause on the line. "May I ask why?" "Because I don't need an umbrella," I replied. "I have my own." The second call was sharper. A different lawyer, this one less patient. "Rebecca, what you're doing may constitute misappropriation of company assets. We're prepared to pursue litigation if necessary." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply repeated what Eldon had drilled into me. "Please direct all legal inquiries to my attorney." Then I hung up. The third call was desperate. A senior executive, the very same who had signed my termination papers, dialed me personally. "Rebecca, let's not play games," she said, her tone brittle. These accounts belong to the firm. You're out of your depth. Do you really think you can run this alone? Her voice carried the same disdain she had always shown me, but this time it didn't sting. It only confirmed what I already knew. She underestimated me. She always had. I'm not alone, I said quietly. I have my clients. And then I hung up. Each call left me shaken. My hands trembled, my chest tightened. But each time I returned to the binder, to the contracts, to the signatures that proved I wasn't the thief they painted me to be. I wasn't stealing. I was continuing what Kitana had started. Weeks passed, and the pattern repeated. The old firm sent offers, then threats, then silence. My office, once bare, began to look alive. Client folders stacked neatly, a calendar filled with meetings, even a small plant on the windowsill that a client had sent as a congratulatory gift. Some nights, when the building was quiet and the city lights flickered beyond the glass, I would sit back in my chair and whisper into the stillness, "We did it, Kitana." Because this wasn't just survival anymore. It was the beginning of something larger. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. It was a rainy Thursday when I saw him again. Daniel, one of the only colleagues who had ever shown me a sliver of kindness back at the firm. We hadn't spoken since I walked out with my resignation letter, and when he called asking to meet off the record, my first instinct was suspicion. But there was something in his voice, clipped, urgent, that made me agree. We met at a small diner on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where no one looks twice at two people talking over coffee. Daniel looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in the heaviness of his expression, the lines around his eyes. He kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone to follow him. "Rebecca," he said quietly, when I slid into the booth. "I shouldn't even be here." "Then why are you?" I asked, studying him carefully. "Because you deserve to know what they're planning." He leaned forward, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. "Management isn't just angry you left. They're furious. You humiliated them. Clients walked straight out the door after your resignation, and now they're panicking. They've decided to make you the villain." My stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward the waitress passing by, then back to me. "They're digging. HR's been told to comb through every file you ever touched. Expense reports, emails, time logs. They want something, anything they can twist into misconduct. If they can't find it, they'll invent it." I stared at him, forcing myself to stay calm. "Rumors." "Already spreading," he said grimly. "They're telling people you stole proprietary data, that you manipulated Kitana's clients while she was sick. Some are even saying you pressured her into transferring accounts before she died." The words hit me like a slap. "That's disgusting," I snapped, louder than I meant to. A couple at the next table turned their heads. I lowered my voice. "She trusted me. Everything we did was legal, documented." "Eldon," Daniel raised a hand. "I believe you. But they don't care about the truth. They care about perception. And if they smear you hard enough, some people will believe it. Enough to damage your reputation. Enough to scare clients." I clenched my fists under the table. "What else?" He hesitated, then sighed. "They've frozen payments to Kitana's estate. Her sister's been calling the office, trying to get what's owed from her deferred bonuses. They keep telling her the paperwork is under review, but I've seen the internal memos. It's deliberate. They want leverage. They think if they stall long enough, they can pressure her family into silence about everything." My throat burned. Kitana wasn't even cold in the ground, and already they were punishing her family. "She gave them her entire life," I said through clenched teeth. "Decades of loyalty, of building revenue no one else could. And this is how they treat her?" Daniel looked down, ashamed. "I know. That's why I called you. They won't stop at her. They'll come after you harder. I thought you should be prepared." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, anger and grief colliding in a way that made it hard to breathe. I had left the company thinking I was fighting for my own survival, for the contracts Kitana entrusted me with. But now I understood it was bigger than that. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were erasing her. I remembered her words, that last night in her office when she warned me. After my death, the real struggle will begin. She had been right again. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, but it felt like steel. Then I don't just fight for me, I fight for her family, for every client she protected. They want to make me the villain? Fine. But they're about to learn what real loyalty looks like. Daniel exhaled, relief flickering across his face. Be careful, Rebecca. They play dirty. I know, I said. But so do I. When I have to. We finished our coffee in silence. When he finally left, I sat in the booth a while longer, listening to the rain against the windows, staring at the reflection of the neon sign in the wet pavement. For the first time since Katana's death, I felt something sharper than grief. I felt resolve. This wasn't just business anymore. This was war, and I had no intention of losing. The attack came fast, and for a few days, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake thinking I could stand against them. It started with whispers from my clients. Turner and Beck called first, Greg's voice tense. Rebecca, they've offered us a 40% discount if we stay. 40. That's suicide for them, but it's tempting. No one ignores numbers like that. The next morning, Tempest Living Well forwarded me an email with the company's logo stamped across it. Bold claims about how my unauthorized venture lacked stability, how I couldn't possibly provide long-term support. At the bottom, in smaller print, a note about pending legal review. It was a threat dressed as information. By the end of the week, 3 of my smaller clients were wavering. They called me late at night, apologetic, almost embarrassed. We believe in you, Rebecca, but our investors are nervous. Your old firm is saying you're not secure, that your contracts won't hold up if there's litigation. We can't risk being left in limbo. I hung up each time with my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Katana's portfolio had given me strength, but strength doesn't pay bills, and fear is contagious. Eldon, my lawyer, was blunt when I called him. This is exactly their strategy. Undercut you until your financing dries up. If you can't raise capital fast, they'll squeeze you until you collapse. And he was right. My small office felt smaller with each passing day. The folders on my desk, once symbols of progress, started to look like anchors dragging me down. That's when I thought of Diego. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. He had been my partner once, not in business, but in something almost like it. Long nights in graduate school, shared projects, arguments that burned hot but always ended in respect. He had gone on to build his own reputation in the financial sector, sharp enough to be feared, steady enough to be trusted, the kind of man whose handshake still carried weight. I hesitated before dialing his number. What if he refused? What if he thought I was just another desperate founder begging for a lifeline? But when he answered, his voice was warm, familiar. Rebecca, after all this time, I thought you'd forgotten me. I need help, I admitted, the words tumbling out faster than I intended. They're trying to kill my company before it even grows roots. Price cuts, legal threats, scaring off investors. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You always did aim for battles bigger than yourself. Send me everything. I'll take a look. 2 days later, Diego walked into my office, his presence filling the cramped space as if it were a boardroom. He studied the documents, the contracts, the emails filled with veiled threats. Then he looked at me, eyes sharp. They've overplayed their hand, he said simply. I frowned. How do you mean? 40% discounts? That's not strategy, that's desperation. It tells every investor watching that their margins are collapsing. They're not protecting themselves, they're bleeding. All we have to do is make that visible. Diego moved quickly. He called contacts in finance, people I could never have reached on my own. He drafted reports, highlighted the firm's reckless pricing, circulated quiet memos to industry analysts. Within a week, the narrative shifted. The firm wasn't crushing me. They were panicking. Investors started asking questions. Why slash rates so dramatically if their position was secure? Why smear a small competitor if she wasn't a threat? My clients noticed too. Turner and Beck called again. "Rebecca," Greg said, almost laughing this time, "your old company is tying itself in knots. I think we'll stick with you. At least you don't look desperate." Tempest Living Well signed a new 2-year agreement with me. Vernon Hutchcraft doubled his order volume. The very pressure meant to destroy me had turned into proof of my value. And it was Diego who made it happen. He sat across from me one evening as the office lights dimmed, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. "You were right to call me," he said. "But you need to remember something. This isn't just about survival. Every attack is an opportunity. If you treat it that way, they'll never get ahead of you." For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lift from my chest. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Katana's legacy, my client's trust, Eldon's precision, and now Diego's authority. The company wanted to break me. Instead, they had forced me to become stronger. And as I looked at the stack of new contracts on my desk, I realized something Katana would have loved. The war had only just begun. Success didn't come in grand leaps, but in small, deliberate steps, the kind Katana had always taught me to take. Every week I met with clients, not just to check boxes or renew agreements, but to listen. Turner and Beck wanted to expand production into a new region, so I researched distribution channels and connected them with suppliers they hadn't considered. Tempest Living Well struggled with seasonal shortages, so I proposed a logistics calendar that mapped demand peaks against local crop cycles. Vernon Hutchcraft dreamed of passing his business to his son, so I brought in consultants to help structure a succession plan. None of this was required of me. A vendor doesn't solve problems beyond the contract. But I wasn't just a vendor. I was Katana's student, and she had drilled one truth into me over and over again. Clients don't remember who fills out forms. They remember who makes their lives easier. So I made myself indispensable. And it worked. My phone rang not with complaints, but with ideas. Clients called me before they made strategic moves. They stopped asking if I could help and started assuming I would. Every solution I offered built another layer of trust, another reason they wouldn't leave, even when the old firm dangled discounts or whispered doubts. But the firm didn't sit quietly and watch me grow. The first signs of aggression were subtle. Rumors seeded in trade circles. Investors began calling me nervously. "We heard your financing is unstable. Are you sure you can support your contracts long-term?" Suppliers asked questions about my solvency. Even one of my newer clients pulled me aside during a meeting and admitted, "Your old company says you'll fold within the year. They're telling people to prepare for disruption." At first, I tried to ignore it. But soon, it escalated. One client received a confidential memo suggesting my contracts weren't enforceable. Another got a phone call late at night from a senior executive who warned that working with me could result in complications during audits. A third had their invoices mysteriously delayed when processed through systems still connected to the old firm. They weren't just competing anymore. They were harassing my clients, planting fear like weeds in a garden I was still tending. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into their gleaming office building and demand they stop dragging Katana's name through the mud, stop treating her clients as pawns in their petty war. But I remembered her warning, "Don't fight on their terms." So I stayed calm. When clients asked about the rumors, I didn't deny or deflect. I pulled out the contracts. I showed them balance sheets. I explained financing plans transparently. I reminded them, gently but firmly, that fear was exactly what the old firm wanted. And then I followed up with something practical. A new idea. A solution tailored just for them. "Look at what they're saying," I told Greg Turner once, sliding a pricing chart across his desk. "Now look at the plan I've built for your expansion. Which one of us is actually building your future?" He smiled. "That's why we're still here, Rebecca." But the attacks wore on me. Each rumor was a stone in my pocket. Each phone call from a worried client, another weight on my shoulders. Nights stretched long in the office, papers spread across my desk, my reflection faint in the glass as the city moved outside. Some mornings, I barely recognized the tired face in the mirror. Then came the meeting. It was a Thursday afternoon when Eldon called. "Rebecca," he said, his tone clipped. "They've requested a sit-down, not in court, not through lawyers, in person." I almost laughed. "Why? So they can try to scare me face to face?" "Or buy you," he said bluntly, "which means they're desperate." 2 days later, I walked into a private dining room at an upscale hotel, the kind of place executives use to seal mergers and bury scandals. Waiting for me were three of them, my former boss among them, her smile sharp as glass. "Rebecca," she said warmly, as if she hadn't once looked me in the eye and eliminated my position. "You look well." "I am well," I replied evenly, taking a seat. Wine was poured, pleasantries exchanged, but the air was tense, charged. Finally, one of the executives leaned forward, folding his hands. "We'll be direct. You've done impressively well for yourself, more than we expected. But we all know this can't go on forever. Competing like this damages everyone. It's inefficient, hostile." I raised an eyebrow. "Hostile." He ignored the jab. "So here's our proposal. Join us. We'll bring you back under the company umbrella, not as staff, but as partner. A place in management, influence, stability. In exchange, you bring your client portfolio with you. Everyone wins." The words hung in the air like smoke. I studied their faces. Polite, calculated. But beneath the veneer of confidence, I saw it. The flicker of unease, the strain in their eyes. They were bleeding. Kitana's clients had chosen me, and no matter how many rumors they spread, no matter how many discounts they offered, those clients stayed. My existence was costing them money, reputation, credibility. This wasn't generosity. This was surrender dressed as magnanimity. I let the silence stretch, enjoying for once the weight of it pressing on them. Finally, I smiled. Not warm, not grateful, but calm. "You're offering me the very things you claimed I was never worthy of. A seat at the table, authority, respect. Do you realize what that tells me?" My old boss's smile faltered. "That we recognize your potential." "No," I said quietly, "that you've lost." Their expressions shifted. Shock, then anger, then something almost like fear. I stood, gathering my things, my chair scraping against the polished floor. "Thank you for dinner," I said, "but I already have a company. I don't need yours." And then I walked out, leaving them in the silence they once forced on me. On the sidewalk outside, the city air felt sharp, alive. For the first time since Kitana's death, I didn't just feel like her student. I felt like her successor. Because I understood something clearly now. This wasn't their last move, but it was their last good one. Everything from here would be desperation, and desperation is easy to beat. The lawyer's office was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels padded, insulated from the noise of the city outside. Thick carpets muted my footsteps as I followed Eldon down the hallway, clutching the leather binder Kitana had left me. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the gravity of what I carried. We entered his private conference room. He closed the blinds, set a folder of his own on the table, and looked at me with unusual solemnity. "Rebecca," he said, "you've been holding this long enough. Are you ready to let it speak?" I set the binder down between us, its weight landing with a dull thud. For months, I had protected it like a lifeline. Contracts, transfers, legal amendments. Those were the obvious treasures. But deeper inside, hidden in sleeves and tabs Kitana had marked with tiny black dots, was something far more dangerous. Evidence. Kitana hadn't only built her portfolio, she had built a record. "Read the red tabs," I whispered. Eldon flipped open the first section. His brows furrowed as his eyes scanned the pages. Financial spreadsheets showing discrepancies between reported revenues and actual client billings. Emails where executives instructed staff to adjust figures before sending them to auditors. Contract amendments backdated to cover failed negotiations. Bonuses reallocated from junior staff to inflate management's numbers. Every page was damning. "These are years of fraud," Eldon murmured, his voice almost reverent. Rebecca, do you realize what you're sitting on? Yes, I said. That's why Katana kept it hidden. She knew they'd bury her if she exposed it alone. She wanted this to survive her, and she wanted me to know when to use it. He turned another page. These are executive authorizations, multiple signatures. They'll have no defense. I leaned forward, my voice steady. They tried to erase her. They tried to erase me. They froze her family's payments. They smeared my name. They thought power would protect them. It won't. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was heavy with inevitability. Then Eldon closed the binder, straightened in his chair, and said, I'll file this immediately. The regulators won't ignore evidence this detailed. The next week unfolded like a storm. First came the leaks, anonymous tips to financial watchdogs, regulators, even journalists. Then the subpoenas, quiet at first, then louder, spreading through the company like cracks in glass. Investigators walked into offices with clipboards and left with boxes of files. Emails were seized, servers mirrored. The firm tried to project calm. Press releases declared full cooperation. Executives stood in front of cameras with polished smiles and rehearsed statements. But the cracks widened fast. News outlets reported serious irregularities in revenue reporting. Shareholders demanded answers. Analysts downgraded stock ratings overnight. By the end of the second week, the share price had dropped 18%. By the third, it had collapsed 40%. The gossip mill, once turned against me, now turned inward. Did you hear? They froze bonuses last quarter because the numbers weren't real. The COO's been suspended. The CFO hasn't shown up in a week. One by one, executives vanished. Some were on leave, others stepping down. Everyone knew the truth. They had been caught. I watched from my small office, the same one where I had once wondered if I would survive their smear campaign. Now my phone rang constantly, not with threats, but with inquiries. Clients who had once wavered called to say, "You were right to leave. We're glad we stayed." Investors who had once hesitated now wanted to talk. At night, when the noise subsided, I sat at my desk staring at the city lights and thought of Katana. I remembered her voice, low and steady, warning me, after my death, the real struggle will begin. The struggle had begun, but now, for the first time, I felt like I was winning not just for myself, but for her. Because this wasn't only survival anymore, this was justice. And justice had teeth. The new office wasn't much bigger than the old one, but it felt different the moment I stepped inside. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture polished, and the glass door carried a name that still felt surreal every time I saw it. Viridian Strategies. My company. My work. My survival turned into a future. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, waiting to be unpacked. A new desk sat beneath the window, overlooking the city skyline I used to see only from the shadows of someone else's office. Now it stretched wide and bright, as if reminding me that I had space to breathe. But the first thing I did wasn't unpack contracts or switch on the computer. It wasn't arranging the files or checking the calendar. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the frame I had carried for weeks. It was a photo of Katana, not one of the stiff corporate portraits the company had used in their memorial slideshow, but a candid picture from years ago. She was leaning against her desk, smiling faintly, one eyebrow arched as if she had just caught someone underestimating her and found it amusing. Her arms were crossed, her posture casual but commanding. I had written a single line beneath it in simple black script. Success is not climbing their ladder, but building your own. I hung it on the wall behind my desk. The glass caught the sunlight, and for a moment the room glowed as if she were still here. I stood there staring at it, my throat tightening. She had prepared me for everything, for the betrayal, for the smear campaigns, for the loneliness of being targeted. But I realized she had also prepared me for this, the moment when I no longer needed her to guide me, but wanted her there to see what I had built. The investigation into the old company had grown into a firestorm. By now, 3 executives were suspended, 2 had resigned, and the stock had lost nearly half its value. News outlets dissected every fraudulent practice Katana had documented. What they once tried to bury became headlines that would haunt them for years. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Watching them fall didn't erase what they had done to her, or to me. But it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Clients who had once been hesitant now came with renewed loyalty. Some told me directly, "We should have followed you sooner." Others simply signed long-term contracts without needing persuasion. Even a few investors who once ignored me requested meetings. Diego handled most of those conversations with his calm authority, reminding me with a grin that sometimes the loudest victory is letting them chase you. Still, in the quiet moments, I thought of Katana. I thought of the way she tapped her pen against her desk when deep in thought, the sharp click of her heels in the hallway, the way her voice softened only when speaking to me behind closed doors. I remembered her laughter, rare but genuine, and her final warning: "After my death, the real struggle will begin." The struggle had begun, and somehow I had carried us both through it. Now, sitting in the leather chair at my own desk, I looked up at her photo and whispered, "We did it." The phone rang. It was Greg Turner, sounding almost cheerful. "Rebecca, I wanted you to know, the expansion project is moving forward, and we couldn't have done it without you." After we hung up, another call came in. Tempest living well, excited about her seasonal logistics plan. Then Vernon, asking for advice about hiring his son. One after another, the people who once doubted me now trusted me with more than business. They trusted me with their futures. And I realized, this was the real victory. Not the investigation, not the company's collapse, but the fact that Katana's clients, her legacy, her work, were alive and thriving in my hands. In the weeks that followed, the office filled with life. Diego set up a small finance team. Eldon stopped by to check contracts and grumble about my habit of working too late. New hires came on board, bright-eyed, eager, and on the first day of each new employee, I brought them into my office, pointed at the photo on the wall, and told them the truth. That woman is why this place exists. Remember her words: success is not climbing their ladder, but building your own. If you're here, it's because you believe in that. Some nodded solemnly. Others smiled, inspired. And each time I felt a surge of pride, not in myself, but in her. One evening, long after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the quiet office. The city lights blinked against the window, cars hummed below, and the photo on the wall reflected softly in the glass. I thought about the woman who had seen strength in me when no one else did. The woman who left me not just contracts, but courage. I imagined what she might say if she were here. Probably something blunt. Something like, "Don't get sentimental. There's work to do." And she'd be right, because this was only the beginning. I switched off the lights, closed the office door, and walked into the night carrying nothing but the certainty that I had finally stepped out of her shadow, not by erasing her, but by honoring her. Katana had built a ladder the company tried to kick away. I had built my own, and I would never stop climbing it.